All right. Hello, everybody. We are off the cuff and we are live. I am going to be joined today by a special guest and Sarah Enterline. We're going to talk about her book, No Apologies, and I'll get to that all in a little bit. But yeah, it's been great. I'm trying to keep up with the once a month type of thing right now while I'm finishing all my PhD stuff. And so I'm trying to keep out there as much best I can, trying to let my brain get around everything that I'm doing. So appreciate that. So I know it hasn't been as engaged as often as we have. So please be sure to jump in anytime, questions, do that sort of thing throughout the show, and I will be sure to get those in anytime I can. So let me get right to the show, the content. So this episode, we're going to talk, like I said, Sarah Enterline about her book, No Apologies, the life and work of Susanna Newcome, and what lessons, I guess, really we could learn today for women doing apologetics. So we're going to talk, of course, about the book itself, but I think there's some important things that maybe we'll get to as we discuss that. So Sarah is an apologist, a teacher, a pastor's wife, and a mother. And I'm just going to give you the short version of her bio because it sounds like she's a very busy woman. She has degrees in biblical studies, theology, and ministry, social and behavior sciences, and philosophy. Sarah also has a California State certification in teaching history and an MA in Christian leadership. So in March 2009, she founded the International Society of Women in Apologetics, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. Jane Pantig, who's been doing a lot of our show for the last year, she's heavily involved in that. And Sarah's also currently working as an apologist and a writer, as you can tell, because she has a book out. So, Sarah, like I said, you are a busy woman for sure. And apparently you started the Women in Apologetics when you were like 10, I'm guessing, because that's 2009. So you were very young. So that's nice that you were able to start that at a very young age. That's impressive. That's impressive. That's like Doogie Howser kind of stuff. That's awesome. So, but outside of your bio that I just read and you heard all that kind of stuff, what else should folks know about you? What's the scoop on Sarah?
Wow. I've never
I know
heard
I'm
that
starting with the
before.
hard ones first. It'll get easier after this. I promise.
Yeah, well, like you said, I did start the International Society of Women in Apologetics. I did hand that over to two other female apologists in about 2016. And so basically just been kind of writing and working on historical apologetics since then. I teach history full time. That's my full time job. So I've been
Oh, okay.
enjoying that and just working with my husband on his ministry and raising my son. So that's pretty
That's
much,
awesome. So, can you
yeah.
say where you teach without getting like doxxed or whatever the words are these days for canceled, or is it like public knowledge? Sarah.
I will say that I teach at a private school in Temecula.
Okay, there we go. We won't go any further than that. But all right, well that's cool. So that's good. That's interesting. Well, what got you interested in apologetics? I mean, that's a men's
So
only thing, right? I mean, so why in the
yeah.
world? Yeah, clearly you were
Yeah,
looking for your
actually,
MRS, right? This is the
yes,
offensive
yes,
comments
I
at the front. Yeah,
was. No,
you know what that
I
joke is,
totally,
right? You know what
yes,
that joke is?
yes, get your
Okay, I
MRS
remember that.
degree.
Yeah, I remember that joke back in the day. People that don't know,
Actually,
that's
it's,
the MRS means Mrs. looking for a
yeah.
husband. That was a joke, everybody. I'm not really actually doing this, but there are probably a lot of prejudices, or expectations that women aren't in, is what I'm trying to get out in a funny way, people, by irony. That's probably maybe the attitude you come across. So I'm just curious how you got locked in there.
Yeah, so actually, I kind of always was very biblically inclined. I grew up in church and just kind of really enjoyed going to youth group and learning about the Bible and that kind of thing. And I went to Bible college after high school because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I thought, well, there's a Bible college locally, so I'll just go and kind of get like grounded and then figure out what I want to do with my life. And it was there that a Bible college professor I had was actually an apologist. And he was like, you should be an apologist. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And do women do it?
He
So,
wanted to condemn you to a life of misery and poverty, is what it was. So he's like, "Hey,
exactly. I know.
I
I wish I
know."
had known. But yeah, so he really encouraged me in it and just said that that's kind of, he just saw that's the leading God had in my life, and
Mm.
I trusted him, and so I started kind of following that path, and he mentored me, and he's actually the one that wrote the foreword to my book. So Joe Holden, Dr. Joe Holden, he's the president of
Oh,
Veritas
okay.
International University,
I
and
wonder if it was Veritas up there. Yeah, in the
yeah, yeah.
area. Yeah.
So he basically has just been encouraging me and helping me through this. And in 2009, I was in seminary, and Dr. Geisler was my professor. And I was sitting there, and I was not 10 years old. I promise. I was I was college age at this point.
Well,
I'm a lot older than
some
I
people are
look.
college age younger because they're so bright.
Yeah, no, not me. um, But yeah, so I was sitting in Dr. Geisler's class in seminary, and I said, I really love this stuff, but I don't know if this is for me. I was one of very few women in the school, and didn't really see how it could be a lucrative thing. How could I do this for a living? And he just said, I think you should do it. Here's a bunch of women who do it, and they're doing very well at it. And so he really connected me to like Nancy Piercy and Mary Jo Sharp, and just a bunch of other women that I started kind of talking to and getting encouragement from. And then I realized that a few of them didn't know about each other. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to start a group, like an academic group for women who are interested in this stuff. And then that's randomly, I went online, I Googled women in apologetics, absolutely nothing came up. And I decided then and there to buy the domain, so that if other women searched that because they wanted to do it, they would find me. And it really just kind of started as a hub for all of us to connect and have an academic group. It really started as like the sister society to ISCA, which was Dr. Geisler's academic apologetics society. And
Oh,
then it kind
that's
of
cool.
evolved, and I kept getting asked to do things, speak at conferences, and I was like, wait, this isn't what I started out doing. And it just kind of blew up from there. And in 2016, Tim McGrew asked me to come alongside him and work with historical apologetics. So at that point, I handed it over to two young ladies that now run it today.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's a good. That's a very different experience than when I was in seminary. No one introduced me to any women at all, and it was very, very lonely time. It was a lonely time. But anyway, I met my wife eventually, so I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it was a very different experience for us. So
Yeah.
that's awesome though that you were able to get connected and do all those things, and then kind of see a need out there and kind of fill that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It
so it
was,
sounds
dear
like
Lord.
the history side was really a big deal for you, and that I guess leads to the
Yes.
subject of your book, which by the
Hmm.
way is called No Apologies, and it looks at the life apologetic work of Susanna Newcome. I'm saying her name right, right? Susanna
Yes.
Newcome.
Yes.
Okay, I should have asked you that in the pre-show, but I'm not prepared for anything. Um, so I guess I'm curious. How did you find out about Newcomb, and what inspired you to write about her?
So Tim asked me to come and do some work for them. They were working on a grant project called the Special Divine Action Project, and it's really people mapping different apologetic arguments from the modern era. And he gave me a hard drive full of books to read and write summaries of, and map different things to put on this website. And he's like, oh, by the way, I have about 10 women. And I was like, what? And I was shocked that there were women that did apologetics, hundreds of years ago. And so I came across her, and she immediately stood out to me because she was the earliest. She published in 1728. And I was just shocked at the fact that she was so well spoken about apologetics. She just really understood how to make an argument for God's existence. And there was just this wealth of knowledge in her book that I felt I have to tell the world about this woman. This people need to know about her, and so that started me down a rabbit hole of research and different things. So yeah, it was really due to
Yeah.
Tim that I found her.
Oh, that's cool. So now, yeah, I mean, and she published underneath her own name too, right? Because I know that there are women historically that publish under men's names so they could get out there and kind of overcome that expectation or prejudice against the female author thing. But was
She
hers under
actually
her name? And
published anonymously. It was
oh, okay.
anonymous that she published, and it was an open secret in the sense that people who knew them knew it was her.
Sure.
But it was never officially confirmed until she died,
Ah.
and her husband donated her book to and said this, by Susanna Newcome in his hand. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it was confirmed by him, and then also it was kind of an open secret, like I said. So other people did write about her and her work, and so eventually, if you read through the historians of the time, they do mention her as being the author. So it's pretty much decided that she was the author. But yeah, she wrote anonymously, and there are other
Hmm.
women who wrote anonymously, or they wrote under pseudonyms. They would just put, their first two initials and then their last name or something, just so, in case they wouldn't get flagged as a woman and things like that. So, but yeah, but she published anonymously, and it's just kind of an open secret that she was the one that wrote
Huh.
it.
Well, I read under my first two initials, so maybe I'll get flagged as a woman, and that will help me. And that will actually be a positive for me, maybe. I don't know. It
Yeah.
was a very different day and age we live in. That's interesting, though.
Yes, it
No,
is.
that's cool. So, the first part of your book, let's jump into a little bit of the looking at the book itself and some of the content. And as I told you before, I haven't had a chance to read the whole book, but I did try to survey quite a few parts of it here, and kind of see what she was writing, her style, how her approach was, and then also some of your insight that you provided on her as well. I thought was interesting. But I know the part one of the books about her Susanna Newcome's life,
Yes.
and all your study. What was did you find most really interesting about her? So as people might be thinking about picking up this book or whatever, it's like there's a little bio stuff, there's some history. What surprised you about that, maybe, or just kind of inspired you? Anything?
For me, I think it was just how she was written about. The people that describe her, the people that talk about her, the historians that have some little blurbs about her and her husband, everywhere she's just praised as being just a woman above board, a woman with excellent judgment, a woman with character. She's never disparaged. There's never a negative word said about her. And just the way that she's talked about, it just makes me really happy, because the worst thing in the world is when you find somebody that you really resonate with, someone that you really love their writing, and then you find out, like, oh, something about them,
Oh,
or
yeah.
this and that. And we've been dealing with that in the apologetics community a lot
Yeah.
lately, and it's hard because
Yeah.
everything that you write then is tainted by your character. And so I was just really happy that that she was not only a smart woman, but a godly woman of great character. That to
Yeah.
me was something that I really appreciated about her.
Yeah, that's why I tend to gravitate towards more historical people anyway, because I prefer my theologians dead. They can't disappoint you at all. Everything that's known is probably pretty well known at this point. So it's like all the skeletons are out there that are out there, and
Yeah,
they can't really disappoint you, which is nice. I can't
yeah.
take all the drama. It's just not good for me. So I've only had a couple heroes. One of them was living, who and has been a very tragic moment in my life. So I'm gonna go back to dead people. That's just much
Yeah, right.
easier. So you're smart. You're a
Yes,
smart woman, is the point for picking dead women, to
yes,
write about.
yes.
Stick with that. They won't disappoint you. That's
Yes.
a good life lesson for everybody today. So now you said she had a husband. Did she have other family aside that? What was her family life like?
So she actually got married later in life. She was early 40s, and
Oh
but
wow,
before
that is
that,
much
her
later. So yeah.
father was a pastor, so she's a PK, and her dad had a small church out kind of in the country near Stonehenge. She's about 10 minutes down the road from Stonehenge, and so I went and I visited her father's church, and it's just this little beautiful country church. He was a pastor there for over 50 years. So she grew up in a family that was, part of church, that really attended regularly. A lot of her brothers and her uncles went into the ministry. Her nephews eventually went into the ministry, and so she never had kids. She and her husband didn't have kids, but she did have nephews that ended up becoming prolific in the church, and lots of um, just lots of siblings that ended up, having careers in the church and things like that. So she did have a big family. She was one of nine children. So she had a big family. Dad was a pastor, and but yeah, she didn't have kids of her own. So that's unfortunate. I wish she had, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So you got to travel to do a lot of your research. I noticed, I saw some of the pictures you had, and you got to go everywhere. So one, that's awesome and
Yeah.
cool. But
Yeah.
did you enjoy that part of the book, by the way? The research and writing part?
Oh, yes. So I'm a big nerd. I would live in a library if I could. And so for me, the research was probably the funnest part. Just there wasn't a lot about her online. And so the problem is all the primary sources are in England. And actually, most of the women I have about 15 of them, and about 10 of them are British. So, there's about three or four Americans that are a little bit easier for me to research, but the other ones I actually have to go over there because
Oh, you
everything
have
is.
to.
I know it's a
Oh,
sacrifice
I
I'm
no no
willing to make.
no. I understand. I'm starting to research a lot of people who lived only in Hawaii and did a lot of their stuff
Okay.
because it's a very important part of what I need to. And I'm gonna have to maybe travel there a lot and stuff,
I
and
completely understand. We all have to make sacrifices
maybe
to, um,
Bermuda, somewhere
yeah,
like that.
yeah, I totally
Yeah,
get it. It's
terrible, terrible.
I know. Well, if
Yeah.
you're not a nerd, maybe England's not like on your top of your list. But for me, the libraries and the colleges and just that culture for me was
Yeah.
Cambridge. I loved Cambridge. I loved Oxford. So for me, that's the equivalent of my Hawaii, maybe for other people.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience, and it was fun because I found out things I didn't know. And so really it was one of those things that was, some people lived so long ago that all there is primary sources and you have to go dig them up. And so that was a
Yeah.
really fun, I got to, play archaeologist for a little bit, which was kind of neat. So
Yeah. No, I'd
yeah.
probably gravitate towards that too. My wife is more the Hawaii beach and stuff. I don't see the point in the beach at all. It's all sandy, which seems like why would that be attractive to anybody? So I question that.
Yeah.
But books are way more interesting. So yeah, I would probably do that too.
Yeah.
Libraries is a big. I haven't been over there yet, so one of these days I'm
Oh,
gonna
you gotta
find a
go.
good excuse to go over there. And oh, honey, honestly, I have to research. It's gonna be a long time. Yeah, Sarah Enterline said I had to go. It was like where I could only place to do
Yeah.
research.
It
Yeah.
is most of the actually it's funny because working with Tim at the historical apologetics, most of them are British. So, you
Mm.
just have to do the research. I mean, that's just part of the job. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's good. That's great. That's awesome. You got a chance because there's so much that is online. You can do research, do those things. But yeah, there are certain things that are worth doing that you got to find that paper, and that's
right.
tough to do, and
Right.
it can be expensive too. So good for you on making the sacrifices.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that's tough, especially got to take away time from family too. So that's always sad.
Yeah, we went in the summer, which was nice. And yeah, like you said, sometimes that piece of paper is only there. And like for example, her marriage certificate, they just put it online. I don't know. I just missed, but like it's like during COVID, all the libraries and all the museums were shut down,
Mm,
and so they took the time to digitize almost all of their collections. So actually,
yeah,
the stuff that wasn't online before now actually is. But before, I had to actually go and get um, her marriage certificate and actually visit her
yeah.
grave and things like that. Like I actually had to be there for those things. So now a lot of it is digitized, but before COVID, it was not.
Oh man. Well, now you're gonna have to make sure you do your research next on somebody who's not digitized, so that you can go back.
I know.
I want
Actually, my next book is she's not, so I'm gonna have to go
Okay.
over there.
I'm gonna ask you a question about that later, too, so we'll get to that.
Okay.
Um, I want to jump ahead to section 3 of your book, and we'll
Okay.
maybe have a question on 2, but part 3 of the book the is really just the entirety of the text of Newcome's work, right? Called
Yes.
An Inquiry into the Evidence of the Christian Religion.
Right.
And if folks, if they pick up a copy, I know it's on Amazon. You can kind of do this preview of some of the table of contents stuff. Um, but what's interesting is, I mean, it's pretty extensive. I mean, she covered a ton of topics in that,
Yes.
and not a lot of space either. So she's pretty concise. She's pretty
Yeah.
direct. But she just sort of like said, "I'm going to write a book about every single topic there is known to man," and she did that, which was a
Yeah.
bold choice. Uh, but what was her biggest concern? Like, she's 17, 20s is when we said 26, right? Is that what you said?
28. Yeah.
28. Okay. So, 1728, everybody writes for a context. I mean, they're responding to something. Now, so she covered a lot. So it's hard to like, I didn't get a sense of like, what was her motivation? What was she really, apologizing for? No. What was she doing the apologetic against? What was her challenge that she was facing?
So in her time, she's really dealing with deism. A lot of the
Mm,
whole, God kind of wound up the world and then like let it go, that we don't need him to tell us how to live morally. We can kind of figure
mm,
it out through nature and that kind of a thing. But the interesting thing is that actually her 1728 edition was really focused on kind of the case for the afterlife, really that there is more to this life. And if we want to get there, we have to figure out, who the author of that afterlife is and find him and serve him.
mhm,
And really, it was a very interesting argument from desire. Almost, it was about meeting our satisfactions, and we're created for eternal life, so therefore we desire it. So now we need to find out how to get it. And so
mm,
that was really her 1728 edition. And then the crazy thing is that Matthew Tyndall came out with a book called Christianity's Oldest Creation. And that basically argued for the fact that we didn't need any type of supernatural intervention. So, no Jesus, no Bible, nothing, no miracles. God
mm,
created everything, let it go. And that's all we need to figure out how to live. And so she basically read that and then
mm.
completely changed her book and republished it in 1732, answering his as the main bulk of the book.
Ah,
So
okay.
what I did is I took both editions and I kind of married them. In the book, you can see like the parts that are from our 1728 edition are in italics, so you can tell. And I make a
Mm,
note that that's from that edition as opposed to 1732. But really, I married those two, and I so the bulk of. But the crazy thing is, so her first argument is really cosmological in nature. It's very much scientifically based on the laws of nature and physics and Newton's laws. And then you go into two, and it's really an argument from desire. And then three is would God reveal himself, basically answering Matthew Tyndall. So she really has three main arguments that she spends the most time on. But then at the end, she kind of closes with the case for Jesus being the Messiah. So she really does. Crazy, like you said, she's able to get robust arguments in a very small amount of pages, which is crazy to me. I thought that she did an excellent job doing that, just being concise, but also hitting all the main points. She was very clear. She defined her terms, but she was very clever with her syllogisms and was able to explain a lot with not so many words. So it's really cosmological, argument from desire and happiness, case for the afterlife, answering the deist controversy of Matthew Tyndall, and then really the case for Jesus as Messiah. So those are I would say her four main arguments that
mm.
she's covering.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the historical areas that I've studied mostly are really Second Great Awakening. A lot of
Right.
that era for some of the first books that I did, and I was looking at a lot of other theological issues. And the current stuff that I'm doing right now is dealing, I go back, hundreds of years for certain aspects of the science and looking at issues of race and ethnicity, and looked at American slavery and some of these other kind of issues. But a lot of it's really connected to post-Darwinian thought is where I kind of jump into history. So this is sort of a little bit before,
Yes.
really that kind of controversy kind of took shape. But she was around at a significant time when the concept of race had really crystallized in the century right before her, and then it came
Right.
to a head in her century. What does she address? Did she ever address issues of race? This is more of a personal curiosity because maybe
Yeah.
you can become my little research assistant. No, tell me something good. But
Um,
did she write on those issues? Was that something at the forefront of her stuff?
no, she really never touched on that. I like she probably lived. I'm trying to think. I'm gonna embarrass myself historically here. I
Okay.
think she was before Wilberforce, so I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
she
So
was
there'd be
probably
yeah. It
she
wasn't at the height of that issue for sure.
No, yeah, and I think that maybe because she was in academia, she really did live. She grew up in a very sheltered part of England, so and then she was kind of sheltered in academia for the rest of her life, and so I don't know if she ever really had to deal with that issue. It
Mm.
didn't seem like it was something that was I don't know, brought to the forefront at that time. I know that when you read about 100 years later, there are people that do touch on the issues of race. But I feel like she was just a little bit before and maybe in a part of England where that wasn't really something that she had to discuss.
Yeah. I
So,
didn't think so. I was just curious, like, if that ever came up because I didn't, tried to look through the table of contents and all this stuff, and it didn't look like that was an issue that she had
yeah, no.
addressed. And I would be kind of more surprised if it was actually, but I was just curious. That was a personal question.
Yeah, a lot of the women that I've been studying, a very few of them actually talk about social issues. Most of them cover just the basics of Christianity, like is there a God? Is the Bible the Word of God? Is Jesus the Messiah? Um, and then 100 years later, now after the deist controversy, now they're dealing with higher criticism in the
Mhm.
1800s, and so you have a lot of the women kind of picking up that argument and answering the higher critics. And so many of them come from that era, but they really do pretty much stay focused on the just the theological issues, and a very few of them
Yeah.
talk about social issues.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, but that's kind of interesting. So yeah, okay, so this brings up questions. One of the things I noticed on page 20, and I say that because people pick up your copy now on Amazon. Um, but Sarah Enterline's book, No Apologies. That's my that's my plug for you. But on page 20, you mentioned how Newcombe book covers a breadth of topics, and I'm going to read a quote here because this is like kind of what we mentioned here, but I thought this was fascinating. It said, quote, Susanna manages to discuss with clarity and understanding that is astonishing for that time period. The laws of causality, contingency, irreducible complexity, the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the laws of thermodynamics, the unreasonableness of the atheist position, the argument from desire, the pursuit of happiness, the problem of evil immortality, the case that is the case for eternality of the soul, the substance dualism, the case for special revelation, the value and the need for Christianity's moral code, the discipline, the disciples' integrity and the ability to be trusted as eyewitnesses, the cross and miracles, and lastly, the case for Jesus as the promised Messiah of the Bible. End quote.
Yeah,
Wow. So yeah, she really just to get a sense, everybody. There's a ton of things in there, but I
yeah,
kind of noticed a couple of things that you did there, and I just wanted to clarify. Um, you said, of course, you mentioned irreducible complexity, but you also mentioned the laws of thermodynamics. But obviously, the actual formulation of those laws didn't come till after she was around. And how much of her uh, Newcomb's apologetic engaged with? Tell me about how she was engaging with the physics of the day, because I'm gathering when you're summarizing there, you're kind of letting people today know that these were the issues in our language, because obviously she
hmm
wasn't dealing with irreducible complexity because that's a
right.
contemporary intelligent design argument. The
Yeah.
laws specifically are later, which is fine. But so how was she dealing with that? Tell me a little bit about what that looks like for her. Because Because I noticed in a couple
Yeah.
footnotes you mentioned, like I think it was entropy. I noticed in a couple of things, uh, and I read what she was related to, but she wasn't dealing. She didn't have the word. She didn't have that terminology that she was dealing
Right.
with, right? So you're just sort of
Right.
summarizing for readers. These are the issues she's dealing with in her own
Hmm.
way. So put that in a
Yeah.
little bit of context and how she dealt with those.
Yeah, so it actually took me a while to figure out what she was saying, because for me, I was thinking like, oh, people wouldn't be writing about that stuff until way later because they wouldn't have the understanding that we have
Hmm.
today. And that's one of the reasons I was so surprised by her, was because of how well she understood these scientific things that we're still figuring out today. But really, she actually was a contemporary of Isaac Newton. He was a professor of mathematics at Cambridge, where her husband taught divinity, and so it's probably likely that she had access to his work. Actually, her
Oh,
husband,
interesting.
when I went to the school, I actually saw some pieces from her husband's personal library, and he had an original copy of Newton's physics or Newton's optics in his library, as well as some personal correspondence with people who were really hammering through some of these issues. And so she did have access to some of that early work
Oh,
by
that's
Newton.
interesting.
And so that makes me think that, she probably had an edge on some other people of the day. And that's why she was able to articulate these things so well. And yes, I am using, what we know what those arguments are today.
Yeah.
But at the time, she was just saying, we know how the world works. This is how it works. This, things don't move
Hmm.
unless there's a mover, and all that kind of stuff. And so she's just explaining it without actually giving it a name.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
she really does, she draws a law on Newton's laws of physics. And yeah, but we don't call it, thermodynamics until later,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's a
No, but that
modern
was I thought
name.
was interesting. Yeah, that's what I thought was interesting because when you wrote that, I was like looking and I'm thinking, wait a second. Then I went and read like her arguments and what she was, and it's true. Like she was dealing with the concepts without the names, but she was really addressing those
Right.
concepts, which is pretty
Right.
interesting for that period. And so,
Yes, especially
um,
for a woman. For a woman who, it doesn't say she went to university. It just, I'm assuming she was self-taught, or that her parents taught her. I'm assuming that she didn't have any formal education. Her dad was the pastor of a small country parish, so I can't imagine they had money to hire tutors or anything like that. So, if she did get some type of education, it probably wasn't what you would consider the best of the day. And yet she was still able to reason
yeah,
through these issues and really understand them, which tells me that she probably had access to some great reading, and was
yeah,
able to kind of self-teach.
yeah. That's really cool. I mean, well, you think about it. I mean, there's a lot of really good writers and people that are deep thinkers that never really did the whole formal education thing. And I think you found it more in the day. Like now education, I think we assume that makes people smart, but oftentimes it really doesn't. Um, but she definitely, was if you could be a reader and had access to resources, that I don't know. It just seems like there was more people like that back in those days, that were capable of that and like were really just had a passion for it. And so I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed to me that, she didn't have to work, because her husband, made a living and they lived at the college. So that tells me, and she didn't have kids. So she did have
Yeah.
time
Well,
on
right
her
there.
on
Oh
her
my
side.
gosh.
Right.
No
And I'm like,
kids.
man, the things
Jeez.
that
That's
I
like
could
cheating.
do if I didn't if I had time.
I know.
And yeah,
Kids
and a
are a
lot of
drain on your life. I bet you your college guy said, "I'll go to college." He never said, "Hey, by the way, don't have kids because they will
yeah.
suck the life out of you." He didn't tell you that, did he?
No, no.
He was setting up to fail. You've always looked at that guy as a mentor, but he was pick a career that you'll be poor, and then didn't tell you about the kid thing.
Right, right. A lot of the women actually that I've been studying, a lot of them did not have
Ugh.
kids. Some of them did, but
Mm.
most of them did not have kids. Their research and their writing was really their children to them. They were birthing books, which is amazing. But yeah, I can
Wow.
see why today that doesn't happen as often because we don't have the
So
time.
everybody heard that here today. Sarah Enterline said that getting married and having kids sucks the life out of women and will keep them down. Marriage is oppression. It's a form.
That does say
That's what I'm
that.
hearing you say. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing,
No,
and
I'm
it's
just
a little
saying if you
surprising.
want gobs of time to read research, then
Oh gosh.
maybe that's not the career path for you. But
No, it's true. Even is like I've put a lot of time in over the years, with family and kids and stuff, and I'm sure I could have done more, but it's like, but I wanted to have like a somewhat normal family and kids that didn't grow up.
right.
Especially, I was 20 some years and done ministry stuff, and the nightmare stories of PKs, pastors' kids that they grow up and they hate the church because they never saw their dad and he was always more interested in everyone else's trouble than theirs, and
Right.
you get that a lot. So I think you do have to choose to sacrifice some things, like writing and research and all that stuff somehow,
Right.
because you have to raise sane kids. So, but that's,
Yeah.
it's always amazing. Like these guys, like some of these guys, they're like, I wrote 700 volumes when through his life. It's like, yeah, but one, he didn't have like, TV, and two, like they had no kids. Either that or his kids were all messed up. So, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely didn't have the distractions of our day for sure. That's one of the things. But also, I think
Yeah.
about it too. I get so frustrated sometimes because I'm like, well, I have all these great ideas for books, and I wish I could just sit and write books.
Yeah.
But it's just not reality in the world that we live in today. And
Yeah.
so I'm just glad I got at least one out. you know.
Yeah. And nobody can read anymore anyway, so whatever,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
I'm wondering what all these years I spent educating and writing, it's like it's all a waste anyway, 'cause nobody can read it. I know it's funny
Yeah.
though, because I remember when I was in college, I read Booker T. Washington's, Up from Slavery. And
Uh-huh.
I remember, man, I had to crack a dictionary for some of his stuff he was writing. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. And he was like, a guy who was free from slavery, no education at all, as far as formally speaking. And
Right.
dude, the man could write, and it was deep stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, jeez. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's
Well, a
something
lot
to
of
be
the
said for
stuff
that.
that you read from, hundreds of years ago, it's very difficult for us because
Hmm.
of it's almost a different language, that Shakespearean English,
Yeah.
that Susanna was writing with. I mean, it took me a while just to understand what she was trying to say before I could even kind of translate it into a language that would
Yeah.
make it simple enough for, because we're talking about very deep philosophical concepts. And then you add the Shakespearean English. I mean, try to read one of William Lane Craig's books in Shakespearean English, and then that's basically what I was dealing with. And so it's not easy. And I think that that's one of the reasons that so many of these amazing works go unread, because people just they don't want to take the time to figure out what they're trying to say, because you've got two jobs. You got to figure out what they're saying, and then you've got to understand it on
Yeah.
an an academic level.
Yeah.
um, and
Well, and then
so
plus
one
you
of
were probably dealing with the challenges of the weird spellings of everything, like the crazy
Yes.
S's look like F's, and
Yes.
that everybody's right, and you're trying to read it like, what in the what? Why is that's like SS, not FF, and it's like, what word is these?
Right.
You got to retrain your brain to
Yes.
like translate on the fly. It's like crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, I've gotten better at it the more that I've done it, but I definitely appreciate those writing in the 1800s as opposed to the 1700s, because they really abandoned it in the early 1800s, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, no, those early ones are quite difficult to read. And so yeah, that's actually one of the reasons I wrote the book, was because I could just tell people to read her book, but then I don't think they would get out of it,
yeah. That's
what
yeah.
they could if I explained what she was saying,
Yeah.
in modern vernacular. So
I'll give a plug for Logos Bible Software. I don't know if you ever used that or heard of it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
Yeah, they have a. I think they have. I'm gonna get wrong whose works it is. Something like Chaucer or something. I can't remember who it is, but it's a theologian. Maybe it is Chaucer. Because they've done some other classics, but they have. Maybe it's like Fox's Book of Martyrs. I can't remember. They have a. Anyway, it's all in this old Middle English stuff. But they have for like if you go to the New Testament, they can have it in English, then have an interlinear where they have the Greek beneath it, or the Old Testament they'll have
Right.
Hebrew and stuff. So they basically did an interlinear with this. So like there's the Middle English stuff, and then below it they have the essentially modern English translation of the
Right.
English, so you can actually read it. Because otherwise you're like really like I have no clue what's being said, and I can't
Right.
think of
And
who
it
author they did. I was like that's
yeah,
genius.
it was a process for sure because at first I had to understand in my own brain what she was saying. And then I translated it into modern English, but then I was like, okay, wait, I'm translating it into modern English for an apologist, someone who understands all this stuff and I don't need to explain anything else to. But then I was like, but I want
Yeah.
average people to read it. So then I had to even more go through and change up the wording. And so I went through it at least 4 or 5 times, simplifying the language of just the second section because the third section is her original.
Yeah.
But yeah, the second section I definitely went through. I mean, I had to delete entire portions because one of the common things of the day was they'd repeat themselves multiple times instead
Yeah.
of just saying, you know, what I was saying before. No, they would just repeat the whole thing. So I had to get rid
Oh,
of
that's
large
I have students that do that. That's like sort of like padding. It's like they're
yeah.
padding their work. Oh, I see the kind of writer she was. Oh, that's not that
Yeah.
doesn't take. Oh, come on, she's padding her work.
Yeah, but so it was
No,
very
I get it.
distracting, and so I had to get rid of a lot of it, a lot of the repetitiveness, and just kind of get at the meat of what she was saying. So yeah, but if
Yeah,
you read the third section, you'll see that.
yeah. I looked at. So I tried to look at some of it, but it was like I just didn't have as much time as I'd like. But it was interesting the parts that I did
Yeah,
look at.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, that's actually you know one of the things that jumped out. Uh, you know, it's hard to pick one of her things because there is so much that she covered.
Mhm.
Um, but is there a particular argument in her work that maybe surprised you in terms of its sophistication, or was just really unique to her work in some
I
way
would
that you
say
wish people knew about?
Yeah, I would say that it was interesting because she was dealing with the deists. The fact that she went so much into the cosmological argument surprised me because really that's not really what you have to do with the deists because they already kind of accept that there was a creator. It's just the supernatural, special revelation that they're not about. And so I was surprised that she actually did spend so much time on the cosmological, but her cosmological argument is fascinating to me because she really fleshes it out. She spends a lot of time defining her terms, explaining what she's talking about. And she really uses more of like a cause and effect with the unmoved mover and, the laws of inertia and the fact that, if things are at rest, they stay at rest. So basically, like, the whole point of apologetics is to look around and say, why is there something rather than nothing? Because if there was nothing, nothing is all there would ever be. Is basically the case that she's making is, look, if there was ever nothing, well, then you can't have something move, nothing move something. And so she really just gave this great, just scientifically accurate cosmological argument from cause and effect, and just destroyed the infinite regress argument. And so for me, that surprised me that she spent so much time on that. But I'm so glad that she did because it is definitely one of the most sophisticated cosmological arguments I have read, and it comes hundreds and hundreds of years before the modern day people who are doing a lot of work on that, like William Lane Craig and others. And so I loved her cosmological. And then one that I found that was really great was her argument from irreducible complexity, the fine tuning argument, because she
Mm,
really just talks about the fact that, look, if the universe runs like a machine, and we look at machines today and we say, okay, that obviously someone created that machine and it runs a certain way. We can't look at the universe and say, oh, it's not the same just because it might allow a divine foot in the door. And she just basically
mm,
says, like, we're not being consistent with ourselves if we look at a machine and say that has a creator, but we look at the universe and say it doesn't, even though it runs the same way as a
yeah.
machine. And so I thought that that was fascinating because, you have Michael Behe, who's doing the irreducible complexity, and you have, um, uh, oh my gosh, I'm spacing on his name, Stephen,
Meyer,
Meyer, thank you,
Stephen
who's doing
Mayer.
the
I think it says
fine
Mayer. I think.
tuning, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, I was fascinated that she was able to really articulate those thoughts at a time when, the scientific revolution was happening and all that. And so she really was just at that great time. But the fact that she was able to formulate it so well, so early, when all that stuff was still being discussed,
Yeah.
was amazing to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
I
those
can think of the
two.
tweet. I know how I know how I'm promoting this show right now. It's like, I'm going to say, a headline, Behe rips off Susanna Newcomb. He's a hack, stole all her stuff. William
Yeah,
Lane Craig is
yeah,
stealing
yeah,
from women. That's how
yeah. So, but I mean,
that's what I'm tweeting.
the funny thing is that I would have thought that if I thought that she had actually been read, but I honestly don't think that
Yeah.
she's been read by these people. And so,
Mm.
so I really just think it was a coincidence on their part. But I'm
Yeah.
like, man,
Oh,
like,
it's probably what they
I
want you
mean,
to
we're all
think.
humans. We all look at the world and we see, okay, we all think the
Yeah.
same, and but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I sometimes think, I'm like, man, and that's one of the things that I think is funny, is that a lot of these women I'm reading, I'm like, C.S. Lewis had to have a hold of these, because, like, for example, I was reading one woman last night, and she really flushes out the trilemma, the trilemma that C.S. Lewis talks
Oh
about.
yeah.
And I'm like, I swear C.S. Lewis read this book, because it's so, exactly what he says, but 100 years before him. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. And it's like they say, there's nothing new under the sun, and I think one of the neat
right.
things is whether it's I mean, yes, as men and women, we have different perspectives on the world, and there's a beauty in that God has designed into us. But at
Right.
the same time, it shouldn't be too surprising that good minds are good minds, and that they come up
Yes.
with good ideas,
Yes.
and maybe that's sort of the unfortunate thing about maybe in times past where the culture sort of dismissed the female intellect and the capacity to think deeply on these things, and we missed out on some great stuff. Maybe we'd have been there sooner. Maybe if some of their works would have been
Yeah.
read sooner, the culture would have been shifted in different ways. Who knows? But of course, for
Yeah.
every maybe Susanna Newcomb, there's a nutty Beatrice Baumgartner who was like, the pre-Darwin chick that like argued that her husband was definitely from an ape, and that was her whole point. You don't know.
Yeah, well, there
You
are,
know?
as I've been studying these women, I do hear women's names, and I think, oh, maybe she was an apologist, and then I'll research them. And there were definitely women who became skeptics, or, like, there was one woman who became a skeptic and actually corresponded with Darwin. And she started out a Christian, and she eventually renounced her Christianity, and became a skeptic, which, I was disappointed, because she wrote this amazing apologetic work and then kind of renounced it later in life. And so there are those out there that, kind of ruin the cause for us. But I do think about that. I'm like, man, I'm like, no one really was really talking about the cosmological argument until William Lane Craig. I'm like, how great would it have been if we had had Susanna's work, that we could be
Yeah.
talking about it and things like that. And I do read these works, and I'm like, man, I'm like, that person just came up with that, and this woman's writing about it 300 years ago. So
Wow.
I do think about that. I do think about, man, what an embarrassment of riches that we have lost or ignored, or that we're not paying attention to, that we've missed out on, just because we're not reading these old works.
Or Craig's just a bad researcher who didn't come up and find it. I'm willing to throw him under
Yeah.
the bus because I don't know him, and he doesn't care about me anyway, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, all right. So all right, those are cool. Obviously the issues today, like the deism thing isn't, well, I mean, naturalism is today, materialism, I think that kind of crosses over theistic evolution,
Mhm.
especially sort of the naturalistic theistic evolution. That brand of it is certainly crossover with deism. But for Christians reading today, our issues are a lot more, the social issues that drive our thinking seems to be way more, just kind of the horses drawing the cart, so to speak, these days.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but what is it? What's in this work from Newcome? In your book that Christians today should really know about. Is there some part of that you think, hey, okay, we can read all these other people, the authority of the Bible, the resurrection of Jesus, or whatever, and so why should I go through the hassle of reading somebody who's hard to read anyway because it's old English and all this other kind of stuff? But are there elements to this? Do you think, okay, this is really worth it? This is why I wrote this, and this is why people need to get it. And I don't mean it purely from a sales point here. I just mean really, what do they need to read about her? Um,
Yeah. Well, for me, I guess one of the reasons that I never really got into the social apologetics aspect was, and I could, as a woman, I could definitely go down that road and be very, very vocal about that. But for me, I feel like if we just got back to the foundations, if we just all
mm,
really took to heart that God created us in his image, that Jesus died for us, that we are all one. I feel
mm,
like if we just got back to those core things, we wouldn't have a lot of the issues that we have today. I feel like those
very
core
true.
issues of, look, God created you for a purpose. He created you for eternal life. Like, then the things that we worry about now, the things that we argue about would seem so petty, compared to eternity, and we're going to be spending time with him. And if,
Yeah,
and if we really, yeah, if we really understood that we were made in the image of God and we respected other people for being made in the image of
yeah,
God, I feel like we wouldn't even have these issues. And
yeah,
so there's a couple of things that I think that she's valuable today. Number one, she is a woman. And we definitely need more female voices in the theological, apologetic, biblical, academic world. We definitely need to hear those voices. And she did it so well and so succinctly that I feel like, if you're like, well, I want to read a female apologist, and but I want to get a good general idea of what apologetics is, I feel like she's it. Like
mm,
she
because
covered
she
it
covered it
all.
all. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
and
definitely did. I
so
mean, there's
yeah.
everyone heard. I read what he was in there. That was just like a small part. That's like
Yeah,
a
and
huge
so
thing.
because she covered so much, but also I think, like I said, I feel like today, especially in the church, one of the things that we have, a lot of people who like to talk, like to argue, like to have information. But then there's not that aspect of having that true relationship with Jesus, and really that understanding that he is the Messiah. And I feel like if we were more confident in that, I feel like that we would do a lot better
Mm,
in apologetics. I feel that if we understood our role in God's plan and what Jesus did for us, I really feel like apologetics would be more effective.
mm,
And so, if nothing else, I feel like her book gives us confidence that Jesus is who he says he was, that we are here for a reason, that we do have a calling to proclaim him. And I feel like all the other little petty stuff would just kind of go away if we really understood the
yeah,
whole purpose of us being here. And I feel like
yeah,
she spends enough time on that, the person of Jesus, that I just love that part of the book. Just
mm,
it just gives me confidence as a Christian, that no matter what
yeah,
happens, that's still true, and I can still hold to that.
yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think there's a large truth to that. I mean, I deal more with the social issue side of things, but I think part of my strategy for that is, you know, you have to tie people back to those core doctrines, those core beliefs.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just arguing about the difference of what this is or that is, as opposed to
Right.
framing it from where our foundation is. And to
Right.
me, it's trying to convince not just even younger people, to be honest. There's a lot of mature Christians who don't understand either. But the issue of race or the issue of gender, or sexuality, those are important issues. But the solution is rests in trust in the Scripture, trust in the person of Christ, and
Right.
those are answers. Those are real answers to those
Yes.
things, like you're saying. And
Yeah.
so, and if you doubt that, then everything else is, we're just gonna never agree about anything. And so, I
Right.
think you're right,
Right.
and that the fundamental nature of those sorts of things is really key. And making people care about that is tough, I think, these days. But
Yeah, but I also
you know,
think
it's a
today
challenge.
too, the church is, we're getting better, but the church is still slightly oppressive to women in the academic side of things. And so I feel like if nothing else, this could encourage the church that like, hey, this is no new phenomena. Like women have been thinking well for hundreds of years about these theological topics.
Right.
And just kind of maybe hoping it would maybe open the door and just open people's minds to the fact that women are valuable Christian women are valuable members of the church and can think well and can articulate their thoughts
Yeah.
and maybe should be considered more in that area. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's true in a lot of aspects. I think of what we um, have women do or not do or involved. And whether it's teaching in academics or I wrote a book 4 years ago now. It's about elder plurality, and while I do think that elders need to be dudes, um, I think we've misunderstood some of the structure about authority and the way that's treated in the scriptures. And so I don't have a problem with women preaching. And I mean, technically, preaching isn't in the Bible anyway, the way we do it today. So, I mean, having a woman stand up and give a message, if she's gifted and called to do it, I don't think there's any real problem with that, biblically at all. And there's a lot of other areas too. So I always found it ironic that like for a guy to be hired, on a staff at a church, you have to have a seminary degree. But women, it's like, well, you're married to the pastor now,
Oh
so that's good
Lord,
enough,
don't even get me
And
started. Don't even
yeah,
get me started on that.
it's like
I'm like, oh,
everybody hires the husband for a twofer. Yeah, get
yeah,
the
just
free.
because you're the pastor's wife, you must be called to lead the women's ministry or teach Bible
Yeah,
study or and
yeah,
I love and appreciate pastors' wives who recognize that's not their calling. And are willing to raise up other women in the congregation to do so. I think that that's a huge sign of
yeah,
humility, and I'm always appreciative of that when I see it, because I have seen a lot where you have the pastor's wife is the one that's doing all the teaching, and they're just that is not their calling, and so it ends up not being fruitful or whatever. And so I definitely think it's true that we need to look beyond who they're
yeah,
married to.
yeah,
And just see if there are other women in the church that maybe have these gifts that could be raised up for these purposes. And beyond being a pastor, I mean, forget about being a pastor, but even just teaching small groups or Bible studies or, just being an apologist. Like, I don't have to be a pastor to be an apologist. Like, every woman's an apologist, every man's an apologist. And just to kind of see that we have these gifts that we can share with others within the body, that we don't have to have this particular title to be able to do so, that it's just open for a professor's
yeah,
wife, that could do that. So
yeah. Well, that gets into a whole other can of worms about I think we misappropriate the idea of pastor. It's a spiritual gifting. It's not a title or an office. So my wife, I think, has a stronger pastoral gifting than I do, and history would prove that's true. I wrote it in my book, and I made her write a chapter in it about that sort of
oh,
thing,
that's awesome.
which she didn't really want to do, but I made her anyway because she really needed to. She needed to talk about some of those things from the wife side of things. But yeah, that's a whole other show that we could do. But that does lead up to you mentioned that this is the first in a series of books on women in historical apologetics. So first, let me just ask this because we're nearing the end of our time here, but so we'll kind of wrap up with these last couple questions. Why is it important? And we kind of already answered this, so if you don't have anything new to add, you can just let me know. But why is it important when we explore the history of women in apologetics? And I think you gave some of those reasons just now. Is there anything else you'd add to what you just said, or is that good? Probably.
Really, the number one reason is that what they said is valuable for us today. I was reading a book last night by Jane Elizabeth Watley, and she's the one that's going to be my next book. And like it's exactly the culture that we're dealing with today. Like, people don't change. And so it's the same culture that we're dealing with today. And so it's just funny because she's in a completely different era but humans are humans and we're dealing with the same issues. And so everything that she's saying, I'm like, man,
Mm.
I should just, if I wrote her book word for word and just put my name on it, people would be like, oh my gosh, it's groundbreaking. But it's, it's just the same
Well,
kind of
part three,
stuff.
you kind of did do that. So
Yeah.
part
No, I
three.
gave her credit. No, my dog's barking
I know.
now.
He's
Penny.
trying to keep your voice down. He's a male. He's an impressive male
Penny.
voice.
Hang on, sorry. Penny.
Okay.
Stop.
I'm gonna mute that for just a second so people don't have to hear your dog bark. And I'll just go before we go to the last little thing here. I'm gonna let Sarah get her dog under control. But while she does that, just say we're looking at No Apologies with Sarah Enterline, and just looking at some of the important aspects of that book and what we can learn today. And as we get back to this last question here, Sarah disappeared to silence her dog. Just want to say this. You can pick up Sarah's book, all the places you can buy books. And she made it back. Yay. Uh-oh, I'm getting the seasick thing again.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
That's okay. I was vamping until you're gone. That's okay. That dog is trying to suppress your woman's voice.
She's a woman though, so I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Women are jealous. Women are the worst. Oh my gosh. You don't even talk like a California girl, by the way. I tease my wife. She's more like, oh my gosh.
I think I sound like a Valley girl, but
oh my gosh,
but that's nice to hear that I don't.
you don't have as much as my wife does in her, so she's
I think I've worked it out of my vocabulary on purpose. Being an apologist and sound like a Valley girl. Actually, when I first started, I called myself the Valley Girl apologist because I sounded very much like a Valley girl, and I think I've worked on that a little bit, so it's not as bad anymore. But yeah, really quickly to go back to answering your question, I just think that everything I read that these women write are things that we're still talking about today. And so I feel like their works are valuable because they are valuable voices that could contribute to the apologetic conversations that we're having today. Just about answering challenges to the Bible, answering challenges to Jesus's personhood, all of that stuff. Like I said, it's the same arguments over and over. They're just called different names. And so I believe their work is still valuable and should be read.
That's awesome. So, hey, real quick, because we're at our end of time, any kind of give us a little hint. What's the secret? What's next? Is it a secret? What's next? Or even if it isn't a secret, just pretend it is and pretend like you're telling me a secret, so I feel special. So, what's coming next for you? What are you working on?
So right now I'm working on book 2, which is tentatively titled More Than Dublin's Daughter. And it's about the Archbishop of Dublin's daughter, Elizabeth Jane Whately. And she wrote more than 30 books, contributed to numerous articles. She lived in the 1800s. And was a missionary and was an incredible woman, a credible apologist. And so book 2 is about her. So it's going to be a biography of her, and then it's going to be her work as well. So very similar to the format of No Apologies, but it's going to be about Elizabeth.
And that's breaking news because you haven't revealed that anywhere else. And this is the first place you've said that. So thank you for bringing that secret news and making it public here on Off the Cuff. I appreciate that. So thank you for that. So, all right. So, hey, everyone, just give you a little final thing here. Wrap up. The book we're talking about today is No Apologies, The Life and Work of Susanna Newcome, written by our guest, Sarah Enterline. And so, Sarah, I wanted to say thank you for coming on and sharing about your research and all the work that you're doing. It sounds like there's a lot of great material that's going to keep you going for a long time. And that's good to hear. So, and I'm sure you'll be wealthy pretty soon with all the book sales. Because book writing, by the way, for people that don't know, that's the path to wealth.
Yes, and women in historical apologetics is a huge moneymaker.
Yes. And I know that's why you got into it. So that's really good. Yes. That was a well-chosen career path. But no, thank you. Appreciate all you're doing, and blessings to you. And folks, we'll be back. I'll be back next month. I don't know what I'm going to be back with. Like I said, I'm just on once a month now for a while until I finish this stupid PhD stuff. And then you can tell him at the end I'm ready to be done. But So I'll be back with something. Lord knows what it is, but we'll talk to you then. Take care. God bless.